Dr. Jerry, you got the whole world waiting. Been ready for you to start the conversation. Your point of view, it got the haters confused. Leave it up to you to bring us all the good news. Positive vibes and the sex appeal too. Dr. Andre Jerry, can I get an interview?
Hello, everyone. I am Reginald Bullock, your guest host for the evening, and tonight we have an exceptional show for you. For the millions of you turning in worldwide, get ready to be enlightened and inspired as we engage in an extraordinary conversation with founder and CEO, Chenae Bullock. In tonight's episode, we'll explore the impetus behind Chenae's new book, 50 Plant Medicines, Indigenous Oral History and Perspective, and how it could change your life. The unique roadblocks faced by Native American women entrepreneurs like Chenae as they make their mark in the corporate landscape. Also, Chenae's company, Mosketu Consulting, and how she uses her company to impact culture and heritage. And finally, the fourth topic we'll explore tonight. And of course, we'll definitely talk about Chenae's vision and aspirations for Indigenous people of the United States. So, Chenae, before we dive into the details, who are you?
Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. Well, I am, like you mentioned, Chenae Bullock. I'm also your daughter. So cat's out the bag to anybody that didn't know, but you are my dad. And I am a very proud woman of the Shinnecock Nation, which is located in Southampton, Long Island, New York. And I'm just an all-around, really humanitarian entrepreneur, and I like to use the term mogul. So that's who I am.
You like to use the term what?
Mogul.
What's
I'm a
that?
mogul. Well, a mogul is someone who really just kind of takes on a lot of different challenges and, does a lot of work, whether it's in philanthropy, whether it's in human rights work, but also entrepreneurialism. And, we just take it by the reins and we just go for it.
Well, audience, as you have heard, I am not Dr. Andre Jerry. He is actually on an airplane right now, flying back to the United States to do business, and requested that I do this show for him. And so I am Reginald Bullock, and you just heard my daughter let the cat out of the bag. She is Chenae Bullock, and we're excited to do this show for you. So we hope that we are able to bring it to the same standard that Dr. Andre Jerry does. I know he has an international listening base, so I hope you enjoy this. Chenae, the
Yes.
impetus behind your book, 50 Plant Medicines, Indigenous Oral History and Perspective, what caused you to just decide to do that?
Well, so interestingly enough, my book is actually dedicated to my brother, Reginald Bullock, your son, because during the pandemic, most people had to pivot. A lot of my work is done outdoors and in the natural environment. And with that being said, we were having a conversation, and he was like, Chenae, somehow the work that you do, it has to be able to get to people just by a click of a button. And I was like, well, how do I do that? How do I give plant walks, and, I started to realize that so many people needed to really understand, the natural environment. And, you can go into the grocery store and buy tea, but do you know how to identify those plants? So I sat down and I just literally jotted off the top of my head about 50 indigenous plants that, if you walk outside, you should be able to identify them. And I just started talking about them. And then I published an ebook called 50 Plant Medicines, Indigenous Oral History and Perspective. And so that was really what made me start that book, and it's just taken off since.
Okay. So now you also say that it can change your life. So how does the 50 Plant Medicine book change a person's life?
Well, like I said, during the pandemic, a lot of people were starting to turn inward, right, in their own homes, in their own, sort of estates, just what's around them. And, if you're hiking or just being outside, there are a lot of amount of indigenous plants that can change your life. If you have respiratory issues, if you have, things going on with your joints, if you have rashes, if you've been bitten by a bug. There's so many different plant medicines out there that exist sometimes within the comfort of your own backyard or your front yard. Sometimes they grow in the crevices of sidewalks, and you may not even realize if you've been bitten or stung by a bee. You need to do something immediately. There are so many different plants out there that their uses are for that, life-saving. So I'd say knowing the oral history is kind of how I've been able to learn about these things, but sharing it is how others get to know about it.
For an example, Chenae, you're out there walking, you come across the plant, and you use it. What kind of plants have you come across, and what have you used them for?
Well, I'd say mullein is a big common plant that a lot of people are becoming a lot more aware of. It's a beautiful plant that grows very tall if left alone. I've seen some mullein plants the same size, the height as I am, if not even taller. And you're walking up upon it because the leaves can almost be a lot bigger than your hand, sometimes larger than your arm. And they kind of, they're like fuzzy, like bunny's ears, very light green. And they have little yellow flowers every other year that grows up the stalk there. And that plant specifically, those mullein leaves, once dried, can be used in many different ways. You can use them by steaming. You can use it by drying and making a tea. And, believe it or not, you can actually inhale it by consuming it, like when it, smoking it in a pipe or some sort of paper, natural paper. You can actually smoke it. And what that does, the mullein itself actually helps with your respiratory. It really helps to get rid of the mucus in your body, especially around the time of allergy season. A lot of people have itchy eyes, or, your body builds up what's called histamine, and that produces the mucus. And that mullein actually helps to stop with that increase of histamine and starts to get rid of that mucus. It's actually been known to help a lot of people that have asthma, like really severe asthma problems. I know a lot of parents that have said that it has saved their children's lives with asthma.
Wow.
So mullein is one of those that you want to keep on your shelf at all times.
How did you get started into this type of understanding of plants as medicine?
Well, believe it or not, Dad, I did listen when I was a kid. But I was always one of those people that just asked questions, like, very detailed questions. If somebody was just, we went hiking as kids, and sometimes, if I was on a tour with someone, I'd always ask very insightful questions. I always ask why, how, what part, what does it look like, or how would you know, or I was that kid, So a lot of people either needed to have patience with me, or I needed to be put next to or underneath teachers that had that kind of patience. And I spent a lot of time with elders. My mom's side of the family is Chenae, and she grew up on the reservation. And believe it or not, she knows a lot about plants. And so, growing up, I just always remember her, with her tinctures and her salves and her teas and her butters and, I just know that, like, there would be a problem and she would just come and fix it. As I got older, I started to realize what she was fixing it with and started to asking her some of those questions, and just, walking with her, doing things. I'm just like, oh, wow, this is something that she's known all my life. I just needed to just start asking, and then when I start asking, well, where did you learn it? So I'd go spend time with the people that she learned it from. And that's kind of how, I think at my age, which we're not going to say, I've been able to, learn a lot more. And I have so much more to go, so much more to learn.
So speaking of learn, there are probably a lot of parents and soon-to-be parents listening to this radio show who have children. What would you recommend to parents with children I mean, that's an oxymoron, right? But what would you recommend to parents to help get their children started in discovery? Not necessarily exactly the way you did it, but to open their eyes. I know on your website and various Facebook posts and other things, you are always around children. So how would you encourage parents to expose their children to this type of opportunity?
Well, I think it's always great to know the child. Sometimes wanting to expose the child to something that they just don't, they just don't register with, it can essentially be a waste of time. But there might be something within that, and just having them around it, and then really paying attention to what about that environment is the child drawn to. Just having them outside. Some children are just really not into plants; they're into bugs. Some children are just not really into flowers; they're into trees. There are people that literally their job is to diagnose trees, and that is fascinating. And there are some people that are just into plants. And so I think, into grasses, which is a whole different spectrum in itself. Some children, just got to figure out what area. But I would say just find, there's plant walks that you can go on. There's hiking tours. There's an amazing group of women that they do something called a maternity hike. I don't know if they're still doing it, but almost every other Sunday or every Sunday they were doing like a maternity hike. And a handful of doulas and midwives bring the mommies to be and the dads hiking. And it's usually like a 3-mile hike, and they do this every Sunday. And so I was able to go and just sort of, just kind of help a little bit with plant identification. But that hike alone is just like, something good for this child to just get used to. I have a godson where we would just go walking, we go hiking, and then just take the time and stop. There's so many cool apps out there. There's an app that I use called Picture This. I pay the premium. Picture This. And kids are really into technology, right? And so how do you kind of bring them into nature? Well, you kind of bring little hints of that technology. Maybe bring the iPad and you download Picture This, and you use that app and you take a picture of it, and my godson's 9. He can now identify at least 9 different indigenous plants, right? When he was 6, he knew 6. And that was exciting. That was a game. It's like, okay, well, if you're 4 years old, you need to know 4 plants. And so we go down the same path, every weekend, and I would point it out, and I would say, what is this? And he would say, white pine. I'm like, okay, well, what is this? He would say cedar. And that is encouraging. And then eventually, as he's older, if I'm somewhere on the trail, I could say, I need you to go get me some cedar. He should be able to come back with cedar leaves because, one, he's remembered what cedar looks like. And when we come home, he knows what to do with cedar when he has a fever. He's like, can you boil cedar? And I put my head over it and you steam my face. He's now 9 and he knows how to do that. Now when he becomes 15, he can leave the house, go get the cedar, come back in the house, boil the pot for me if I needed it. Wow. And so it starts at a young age, starts at a really young age. And it just starts with plant identification.
So thank you, Chenae. You may have noticed that my sound sounds a little different. We are on an international radio show. So I switched from cell phone to landline because it changed, but thank you for keeping it going. I want to transition, if you don't mind, to a different subject. All of these are about you. And there's a lot of roadblocks faced by Native American women entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And it's hard sometimes to make their mark and your mark in the corporate landscape. Can you talk about some of those challenges and the roadblocks you faced as a Native American woman entrepreneur?
Yes, I sure can. There's this term or this phrase that's being put out there, and I don't know how I really sit with it, because it's a phrase that's called "the future is female," right?
What?
I believe in the
future
is the future is female.
Okay.
that's a phrase that's kind of circulating. It's been circulating for the last 2-3 years. And I believe that there has to be a balance with all people. However, I do recognize that the new energy of femininity, of feminism, and of divine feminine in leadership is very new to what's been the traditional patriarchal, white male-dominated leadership. And that could be in philanthropy, that can be in business, that can be anywhere, in management. And so a woman like myself, who is the founder and CEO of Mosketu Consulting, it's a 5-year owned and operated, Native American owned and operated cultural preservation firm, I've found that when I am at the table, it is very challenging for others to recognize that this is a woman that actually the buck stops with her. She makes the final approvals. And that's a challenge because it's new. It's not something that people have been used to. And so I find that, in order to succeed, we have to figure out how to work together. So I don't necessarily just say, well, this is hard, this is challenging. Nobody wants to listen to me. They just dismiss everything I say, and da-da-da-da. I'm human, and I get those feelings sometimes too. But I try to figure out, what is the best way to collaborate? What is the best way for me to not necessarily win them over, but to continue to do what I'm supposed to do, but help them understand there's a new way of moving when you're dealing with female leadership.
To that end, can you give an example of one of the most frustrating roadblocks you may have faced and how you got past it?
Yes. So I actually I do some work for my tribe. So you have Native American-owned tribal business, which is owned by the tribe. And so I am the CEO and managing director of one of their entities. And so different partners, when it comes to making approvals, it's me that the tribe has elected. And typically, for the most part, everyone that is equivalent to my position on the outside is usually a white male. So it's really hard for them. So a lot of times what I've seen is that instead of saying, okay, yes, Chenae, we'll take that and run with it, they either A, want to say that it's not really my say, and they think they're going above me by speaking to the tribe itself, but the tribe pretty much just goes back and says we've appointed Chenae into this position, and it's really her decision. So what I've found is if they try to go around me, or they try to make it challenging where it takes a really long time for us to actually get something done. Because if it's like, okay, this is how I want to go forward with this. This is how we've assessed it. I have had informed consent to make this decision, and this is what we're going to go on it. Believe it or not, it could take almost 2 or 3 months for them to actually say, okay, well, finally, we realize that we can't go around her. We've realized that, and it takes mediation. It's really a problem. I find that I'm not the only person dealing with this, but it is.
So to that end, you're not the only person. To the Native American women out there, particularly entrepreneurs, but also Native American women who aren't entrepreneurs, what would you say to them to help them navigate their path through and around or in, under, over the corporate landscape?
I would say remember who you are. There were women like Quashawam, Sacagawea, Harriet Tubman, all kinds of women, Nefertiti, all kinds of women, Queen Sheba, Weetamo. These were chief women, right? These were women in position such as CEO or managing director or founder or king or queen. And we come from those people. So with that being said, sometimes you have to remind yourself the why you are in the position you are in and then the who you are in that position. Not just, okay, I have this title, but who you are sitting in this office, and be unwavering in that and tap into that energy, which is divine feminine because it comes from the divine. And that's what I would say to those that are either stepping into it or, like I said, you don't even have to be an entrepreneurial woman, but as long as you are some sort of woman in a leadership position, you will always be challenged. But how we handle it really determines who we are. You know, it really shows who we are. And I think that's what I'd like to say to those women listening.
Okay. So now this journey of yours, where you are now, didn't just show up. You had to start somewhere. And how hard was it for you to get to where you are now?
Well, it was hard. I think the hardest part was me staying the course. You know, coming out of college, you know, you couldn't really just get a job. You know, people just didn't, you know, you don't have experience, you don't have enough experience. And the thing that all people, young people out of college say is, well, how am I supposed to get experience if you're not getting the experience? So I had to figure out a way to make experience, right? Like, I just created my own thing because nobody wanted to hire me. I was told one time, I was literally told one time by someone, oh, Chenae, it's your name. That's why they're not taking your resume. It's your name. We need to change your name to, like, Ashley or Samantha. What? I was literally told that. Believe it or not, I have been told so many things, but I'll share that little one. Yeah, I was told that. I just couldn't land a job. You know, I almost for 2-3 years. It took a while. So I had to hustle. You know, I had rent. I had responsibilities. You know, I had bills. You know, not as many responsibilities and bills I have right now, but at the time that was a lot coming out of college. You know, car note, just simple things. And, you know, just trying to establish myself in the world. I wasn't getting the opportunity to have experience. A lot of people just didn't really reach that handout. So I did a lot of creative things. I made traditional Native American clothes. You know, I made about 40 outfits a year for like 3 years straight, you know, and I made that for tribes from all the way down from Maine all the way down into South Carolina. And those were just ways to hustle until I took the time to actually just establish my own business. I was working 72 hours a week one time. I was working at a Mohegan Sun Casino, and I was working at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center. And I was actually working, but I felt like I was in debt I was staying in debt because I wasn't getting anything past like $15 an hour. I took jobs that were $10 an hour, $11 an hour, and I was working overtime, you know, just to pay a cell phone bill and halfway pay rent. And, you know, in that time, I would stay up and I would write my business plan. I said, you know what? A lot of these museums are hiring consulting firms that are not native. Now, how is that? When I'm in here, when they're bringing me up to these executive offices to pick my brain and still pay me $10 an hour, you know, and then they're going to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $55,000 for a contract for a non-native consulting firm to consult on what I have the intelligence of. So I created my own firm. You know, it didn't take off right away. I took time to really put into it while I was hustling, and then eventually, you know, some things stuck. My first contract was with the Tribeca Film Institute. And for me, that was someone giving me experience at that time because I had made the experiences leading up. So you have to create your experience, I think.
That's incredible.
As opposed to waiting for it.
And I know you create these experiences for a lot of other Native American women and women in general. And so we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. But before we continue our conversation with tonight's esteemed guest, we're going to take a brief commercial break. So for those of you who are listening to us, enjoying the education and the conversation that Chenae is bringing us, don't go anywhere because you won't want to miss what Chenae has to share next. So we're going to take about a 2-minute break, so stay tuned. And on the other side, Chenae, I want you to tell the audience what your Native American name is. We didn't start with that, so I will do that at break.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Andre. I hope you're enjoying this brand new episode of Live with Dr. Andre Jerry with guest host Reginald Bullock and special guest Chenae Bullock. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for your listenership. I take pride in bringing you meaningful content from experts and thought leaders across numerous industries. If you're an author, entertainer, or entrepreneur with a product or service that you'd like to advertise on our show, or if you're interested in becoming one of our sponsors, send an email to livewithdrandrejerry@gmail.com and ask about our advertising and sponsorship packages. Live with Dr. Andre Jerry is an international radio show that's broadcast in over 131 countries globally. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to promote your brand to a worldwide audience. Again, for more details, email livewithdrandrejerry@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome back to Live with Dr. Andre Jerry. If you're just joining us, our host is me, Reginald Bullock. Dr. Andre Jerry is on an airplane right now. He is asked that I host this show. We're about to dive back into a riveting conversation with Chenae Bullock, author of Indigenous Oral History and Perspective and founder of Mosketu Consulting. Today, earlier on the first half hour, we talked about your book. We also talked about some of the roadblocks and challenges faced by Native American women entrepreneurs. And now we'd like to dive into your company, Mosketu Consulting, and how you're using your company to impact and heritage. So before we dive deep into that, we asked at the beginning of the hour, who are you? You're Chenae Bullock. But who else are you? And what other names do you go by?
I have a traditional Indian name, and this is something that was given to me by our name giver, and it means I lead canoe, I am butterfly woman.
Now, you just kind of put that out there, right? But I lead canoe. I'm going to take a little privilege here. In May and June, you did a canoe journey that I don't know if any other woman has ever done, and certainly not in a long time, to get inside of a canoe with a paddle and a few other people in the Atlantic Ocean and paddle from the Boston Harbor to New York through the Long Island Sound. What made you just decide I can do this?
Well, yes, I left from Boston Harbor to New York City, and those traditional lands are of the northeastern Algonquin peoples, the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, as well as the Ponkapog and Mattakeesit peoples out in Massachusetts, and Wampanoag people, Narragansett, and then coming into Long Island, the Montauk and Cutchogue and Shinnecock. And then as we got into New York City, that's when you're starting to get into the Lenape territory, as well as our other sister tribes out in Long Island. So this wasn't my first time paddling in Long Island Sound. I have done it before, and I've been paddling probably, for canoe journeys almost 12 years now, a little over 12 years. And this is something that has always been done in this region by Native peoples. And so what really made me, do it, I was invited on this journey by a National Geographic mountain climber named Freddie Wilkinson. And there were other tribal peoples from Penobscot, Oneida, and Onondaga were also invited to be guides. And so my portion was to guide through our traditional ancestral route to our territories. And, it just was something that needs to be done. I look at it that the water is very sick, and water has memory, and those traditional songs and our language that is spoken and sang on the water helps to heal the water. and helps the water to recognize, and the life in the water to recognize and know that we still acknowledge them. Although there's so much destruction happening under the water and to the water and around the water, as Indigenous people on land, we are fighting as much as we can, but it is important for us to get back in the water. So that's what really, encouraged me and gave me what you call the audacity to actually, jump in a canoe and paddle that voyage.
And you wrote an article about that, right?
I did, yes. We actually co-wrote an article in an international publication called Cultural Survival, acknowledging the cultural intelligence of the Canoe people. You can Google it and just type in Cultural Survival or Chenae Bullock, Cultural Survival, Reginald Bullock, and we co-wrote that article.
All right, so I don't want to go too deep into the new trip because I know it's still kind of emotional. So I want to talk about Mosketu Consulting. What does Mosketu mean? I mean, it sounds like mosquito. For the average layman person who doesn't know the Native American language, it does kind of sound like mosquito, but it's called Mosketu.
Yes, Mosketu. So Mosketu in our traditional language, when I say our, I do reference the Shinnecock people and Long Island people and all those names I just kind of named a little earlier. Mosketu translates to the word medicine. So I chose the word Mosketu Consulting because in our culture, medicine represents not only just the physical sense, but, the spiritual and the mental and the emotional. And so we consult in those areas. And so that's why I came up with the name Mosketu Consulting.
So, talk about clients. You do in terms of delivery of the services, but your company is certified. I think it's even certified with the Small Business Administration. In the federal government as a Native American woman-owned minority business, right?
Yes. So I actually just, interestingly enough, just went for my WOSB certification, but I am a Native American-owned business. Like I said, I've been in business. I'm registered in the SAMS registry. We have clients right now, specifically in New York, Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, New York Botanic Gardens. Here in the Atlanta area, we have something called WAWA, which is the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance. And so we do a lot of environmental consulting. And so we do everything from, cultural awareness, cultural exchange, cultural intelligence, workshops, just cultural workshops around food sovereignty and traditional sustainable living. We've also do ecotourism. We do paddle tours. We do hiking tours, plant identification walks. There's a tremendous amount of, different things. But we try to, like I said, Mosketu meaning medicine, we try to tailor, our services really to what the client needs. And it's not just cookie cutter. It's really what the client is asking for, or what problem. A lot of times our clients are coming to us to help with a solution, and usually that's to strengthen the relationships that they have with the local tribes within their area, but also, they usually come to us realizing that there has been a lack of inclusion or even just a lack of awareness when it comes to tribal peoples. And this is sometimes within business, sometimes this is just within philanthropy, sometimes this is just in programming. There's all different kinds of ways that we come in to try to help solve the problem.
So now, with your company, you're also an international advocate, is that right?
Yes, I am.
What does that mean?
Well, I guess I could kind of say on Indigenous Peoples Day, for the last 5 years maybe, I have been on what's called the Indigenous Peoples Day New York City Committee. New York City being the largest city in the United States that holds the largest population of urban Indians, has yet to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. New York City also holds the UN, and so there's a lot of work internationally that we do at Indigenous Peoples Day, but not only just that day, to advocate for recognizing Indigenous people, recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day, just as the UNDRIP through the UN, which is the United Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, has recognized that, but the United States has yet to sign on to it, as well as Canada. But most of the casualties and broken treaties have happened in the United States and Canada. So I advocate on an international level, on a global level, for those rights. And I guess that's what makes me an international, advocate for Indigenous people's rights.
So speaking of advocate, this year you recently spoke at South by Southwest down in Austin, Texas, I think in March.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the focuses that you wanted to make sure you imparted upon that large audience down there in Texas?
Well, that's interesting that you say that. What did I want to focus on? Because also in cultural survival, shortly after that, I wrote an article. Can't think of the title off the top of my head, so forgive me, listeners. But just about what I'm getting ready to say, and it's very important to include Indigenous peoples in all areas of every industry. Why is that? Well, the planetary health, we all know, is in a tremendous sickness. The Earth has a high fever right now. Just volcano eruptions, just everything is upside down, backwards, and crisscrossed. And Indigenous people hold a lot of wisdom about how to get to sustainable living here on Earth. And doing that through technology, doing that through fashion, doing that through agriculture, doing that through music. There's all different areas in different industries that we have not really been seeing inclusion, awareness, or presence of Indigenous people at all. It's usually in other box. And so South by has been working to really amplify that. And so this year, that's what we discussed. The topic that I spoke about there was called indigenizing systems. Indigenizing a C-suite, right? If you have a Native American-owned business, or if you're in joint partnership on a project with a tribe, that leadership level should have tribal people at the top of it, not just one person. And these are things that we're starting to see. And there's a lot of studies that show that, tribal businesses or tribal inclusion always find a way to give back to Earth or give back to the environment. Mm-hmm. And that essentially, in turn, helps with that planetary health, whether it's music, corporations, you name it. And so that's what we spoke about at South by, and that was my hope that we reached, that global network of people while we were down there.
So, you talked about the health and 50 plant medicines. One of the things that we didn't talk about during that segment of this show is cannabis. So cannabis is a medicine. Years ago, people had all kinds of names for it, right?
Right.
Weed, herb, chiba, and whatnot. And now, here it is being recognized as a medicine. What are your thoughts about cannabis?
Well, my thoughts, and I will say this, I know for the sake of time, this would have to probably be a whole nother interview. But my thoughts are that there's so much history with cannabis prior to the war on drugs. And that does have a lot of Indigenous history. When we think about hemp, and when we think about marijuana or weed or pot or whatever, the reefer, all these different Mary Jane, all these terms that have been used, right? When we think about that, we think about the consumption of it for the psychoactive activity that cannabis does. But we forget that hemp has been around for thousands of years. Cannabis has been around for thousands of years, and it's also been used for its fiber, right? And to weaving it into baskets, bags, clothing, the sustainable part of it, what hemp does to the earth. There's so many, there's hempcrete that's being created now. So cannabis right now is another one of those emerging economies and industries that's taking off really worldwide, but the U.S. is starting to really look at it from a federal standpoint. States have their own autonomy to, legalize it. And what does legalization mean versus adult use? Not adult use, medical use. They're looking at it now where you can actually purchase it just like any other consumer product. Obviously, it's still highly regulated, but cannabis is also not the only regulated plant. There are other indigenous plants that are regulated, such as sassafras, cotton, all of these, and cotton being a big one. And when we look at the history of cotton, a lot of people look at the history of cotton and know that that was one of those plants that plantation owners, used, and they had it in the stock market.
It was
hemp
currency.
Was also right.
Yeah.
Hemp was one of those plants too. It's just there's other uses of hemp that has a psychoactive activity, but it was used for healing in those times. And so when you really get into a deep dive and conversation about what took place between the 50s and the 60s, you see what happened to the black and brown communities. And you're using that term pot, marijuana, and all those kind of things to criminalize people with it when they were really utilizing that, especially out of the black migration and other times, to heal themselves and get away from the drugs that were being used straight out of the war. These are things that, like I said, it's a whole deep dive into it. But my perspective of it is something that we should really look into the healing properties of it, but really the educational component of it across the world.
You sound like you are an expert in so many different subjects and topics, and not to spend too much more time on, the cannabis. But weren't you on the cover of a magazine that talked about cannabis?
Yes, I was. I was on something called Marijuana Venture. Yes, I do work for my tribe. It's called Little Beach Harvest. It is a huge cannabis operation that we are working on diligently to open the doors to the dispensary, but to create circular economy. And so there are a couple of covers and features that I am out there in for cannabis.
You're just a regular celebrity, huh, Chenae?
I'm just a traditional Native woman, trying to free a plant,
All right, so it's 8:48. We have about 10 minutes left. And I want to give you the opportunity to go off script. So, Chenae, what are your visions and aspirations for indigenous people of the United States?
Well, my visions and aspirations is that we don't become extinct. That's a real thing. Our culture has become so watered down and infused, and it has become this melding pot and rainbow culture of the assimilation that was preyed upon for our people. Not by our people, but the assimilation part was something that they prayed for us to become, is assimilated. And the resistance of those people that fought in every war, and the survival of those people is what is in my DNA and many others. And those are the traditional preservationists, the traditional cultural barriers, those ones that uphold the teachings, the culture, the language, and the ways of the people, whatever group of people that is. But unfortunately, that is something that is becoming very rare in our communities. because of, some people will say social media. Some people will just say that, like, and you know this as my dad, like, starts in the school system. If you have a 5-year-old Indian little girl and little boy that goes into school and they're very proud to be who they are, and their teacher says, well, that's not the case, those people do not exist, I don't know what you're talking about, and the rest of the kids laugh at them. Well, it really takes that child to be gifted with that DNA of resistance to continue on to be 35 years old, to stand here today and say, I'm still resistant to that.
Wow.
But sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes that resistance is just not as strong, and that child assimilates at that age. So through the rest of school and through the rest of their life, they start to move away from the culture. And we're starting to see that more and more and more. You're also starting to see, you said United States, you're also starting to see a lot of terms being used very loosely. You're seeing the term Native American versus Indigenous. Native American is a legal term. That is a federally recognized person in the state of, in the United States. When you use the term Indigenous, or even the newest term is BIPOC, now there is real no identity.
BIPOC?
Yes.
Never heard that.
Yeah. BIPOC is the Black and Indigenous people of color. It is you're grouping. So the identity of the people of the Stony Shore versus the people of the Small Point, or the people of the Shallow Water, or the people of the Black River, there is no identity at this point. You're just BIPOC. You're just all grouped together.
Let me insert something here, because I've been around you, and you use this term called sovereignty.
Yes.
And you have that. A lot of people don't understand what sovereignty is when it comes to Native Americans or the Shinnecock tribe, the Shinnecock Nation. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so, yeah, there's a really cool meme on social media that was put out years ago, and I encourage everybody to find it. It's kind of funny, but it's got Will Ferrell in it, and then it has, the meme says, "What is sovereignty?" And then it's a video of him saying, "Nobody knows what it means, but it's provocative." It's really funny, because at the end of the day, that's kind of like how, you can look at sovereignty today, because people use that word a lot. However, when you look at England and you look at the word sovereign and how they use it, there's really not a word in our language for sovereignty. So where did that word come into the United States when it came to Native Americans? Well, it came from the crown. And who did they give that to? The sovereign tribes, because they had treaties. We didn't have treaties with the United States government, our tribe. We had them directly with England, directly from sovereign to sovereign, because the true sovereignty is from the divine, the divinity, and that is gifted to the people who are original from this land. The land itself is now classified as sovereign land because it is held in perpetuity by the people who live there that are sovereign. And Shinnecock are those people. Well, our land is one of the only lands in the country that is not in trust of the United States government, as we are a federally recognized tribe. So that gives us sovereign reign over our homelands, over our traditional lands, the ones that have essentially been held in perpetuity for us. And so we hold ourselves in that place of sovereignty. Whether people respect it, care about it, move as if we are sovereign, that's a whole different story. But we know and have been, governing ourselves in this sovereign way since, the ships landed to New York.
Does that mean you have diplomatic immunity?
Say that again?
Does that mean you have diplomatic immunity?
That's always going to be challenged, and the easy answer is yes. But like I said, not everybody understands this. When you have people,
to that end, use it in a layman's term, fishing. You have fishing rights
Right.
that no other people have pretty much in the United States, right?
Yes.
Those rights.
You said explain those fishing rights?
Yeah, you have fishing rights differently than most
Yeah.
people. What are your rights to fish?
Well,
Or
as
to do whatever you
Shinnecock,
want to do in the water.
right. Well, right. So as Shinnecock people, because we are one of the only two tribes in what's called the Mid-Atlantic part of the ocean, we sit on ocean policy, but we sit there, and why is that? Because we were the first contacted tribe in New York from the ocean. And so when the treaties were signed very early, as in the 1600s, it we signed a treaty that there was an agreement that the Shinnecock could fish as far as the right whale swims. And we could hunt. We could, yes. And so how do you fish? Well, you ain't swimming out there. You're paddling out there.
Mm-hmm.
You have a boat of some sort. So we can fish and travel underneath those rights of that treaty or underneath that agreement. I won't say rights. Those rights are not given to us. Those rights are agreed upon. They were already rights to begin with before that treaty was created. These are just an agreement that when the settlers came over here, that's what we have. So when we fish, we can fish for as many mouths that we have to feed within our nation. So there isn't a limit to what we fish. There isn't a limit to the weight of what we're supposed to fish. And Shinnecock have those rights.
That's incredible. And I can only imagine how many more rights that you have based on the agreement that have been violated, and so many people don't even know about, to include possibly the Coast Guard and other authorities who's responsible for upholding their rights.
Yes, yes.
So this has been incredible. I mean, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I want to take daddy privilege, if you don't mind, and just tell you how proud I am of you, Chenae. I mean, I'm going to just truly say, right? And so I've watched your journey, and it has been an incredible journey. And here you are now, founder and CEO, and just doing your thing. And I'm not the only one who's proud. There are so many people who are proud of you. I get phone calls, text messages, and emails, and all sorts of communication about people who see what you're doing, and they'll send me things that I didn't even know that you were doing. So I just wanted to share with you how proud I am. I mean, this has been a wonderful experience to interview my daughter, founder and CEO. I mean, how many fathers get to do something like this? So how may the audience learn more about you or content?
No, I really appreciate it. Well, the best way I would say for people to contact me, not that I really appreciate it. I'm not going to glimpse over it like that. My apologies. I'm just realizing the time. I just want to say thank you. That means a lot. You know, for a young woman like myself to have that kind of love from her father, it's everything. You know, it's the reason. You know, it's very important, and I appreciate that myself. And to all those that are listening that do support me and are very proud of me, you know, also pay it forward. Find someone else that you may not feel like feels appreciated, and let them know that.
How would they get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to my website, www.Mosketu Consulting.
Got something in your throat, or you choking up because you're talking to your dad? I think we have a low signal here, and I know it's 8:58, and I don't know if it's my signal or yours, Chenae. But if everybody can hear me, can you still hear me?
A little bit.
Okay. So, well, here we have it, folks. And a big thank you, our inspiring guest for tonight, my daughter, my very daughter, Chenae Bullock, sharing her journey with an aspiration for a future for all. A thank you to our listeners tuning in from around the globe, and we couldn't do it without you. And finally, I would like to also thank Dr. Andre Jerry for allowing me to host this amazing episode. This is episode 14 of Live with Dr. Andre Jerry, guest hosted by yours truly, me, Reginald Bullock. Good night, everyone, and keep striving for greatness.
Thank you.